And the word Shani, like one of its synonyms, manda, means slow. So of the visible planets, Saturn is the slowest moving of all. And that means, in certain ways, Saturn is like a road roller. Once he decides to roll through one part of your life, he does it very slowly. And just when you're thinking, he will now give me some relief, he rolls over you a little more. Then he reverses. He goes retrograde, wakati. And he rolls over you again. And just when you're thinking, now I'm good, no, then he rolls over you again. So that's the number one thing to remember. Saturn is slow. Mm-hmm. So if you want to get onto the proper alignment with Saturn, it's important to maintain the awareness that you can't do it in a hurry. It's not something, we're living in an age where everything is very fast. Mm-hmm. Or as my mentor used to say, we're living in the age of Jatpat Matka. And so many of you may not know that Matka gambling used to be very common here before all of the governments decided that they should be making money out of games of chance as well. So Saturn is an archetype. Saturn is a construct that, yes, he's a planet in the sky, but he's also an archetype. He represents a certain aspect of reality. When he's in Capricorn, he's in one of the two rashis, one of the two constellations that he owns. So he is, generally speaking, happier there than he is in a position in the sky, for example, in Mesh or in Aries, in which he is niche or debilitated. So he is going to be, in certain ways, relatively in a better mood. And I say relatively because Saturn is an archetype that does not have a sense of humor. Saturn is about serious solemnity. Saturn is all about the things in life that we would like to avoid experiencing, but we cannot. Illness, old age, death of ourselves, of our loved ones. Saturn is all about those things that you feel like are fated in life, whatever fate means to you, things you would like to be able to evade, but find yourself unable to escape.
Talking about the slowness of Saturn that you mentioned right now, there is the whole Sade Sati concept. What is that about? Could you tell us a little bit about that? And also, with today, a lot of people's horoscopes have started the Sade Sati. Again, I don't mean to put any sort of fear over here, because like any planet, Saturn too has its good effects. It's looked at as someone who does justice. So he is the ultimate justice system.
Yes. Sade Sati comes from the Hindi word Sade Sat, which means 7.5. So Sade Sati means a 7.5 period. In this case, because Saturn is slow, it means the 7.5 years, more or less, during which Saturn transits the constellation before, the constellation of, and the constellation after the location of the moon in your Janma Patrika, your horoscope. So if, for example, you happen to have your moon in Aquarius, your Sade Sati has begun. If it is in Capricorn, you're in the middle of it. If it is in Sagittarius, you're in the last 1/3. If it's in Scorpio, you are ecstatically jumping for joy because you have finally, see how great it is? Proof positive that you can get out from under the road roller eventually. So this is an indication, and for people in India generally, but anyone who's heard of the concept of Sade Sati, there is a certain fear, and Saturn rules fear. Saturn rules anxiety. Saturn rules the uncertainty about what may happen in the future. And so the moon, archetypally, is the mother, It rules the waters of the earth. It rules the night. It rules all the water birds, rice, all of the things in the world that are juicy. Saturn rules things that are astringent, old, dead, cold, dry, out of sight, out of mind, unpleasant. The moon is pleasant. Saturn is not pleasant. And so the general effect of the Sati is to make things less pleasant, less juicy, less satisfying in your life. And naturally, most people like to have a satisfying, juicy life. And when Saturn comes through and squeezes things so that you have a dry, rocky, sandy, water-free life, naturally, you may feel less satisfied than you did earlier, and you may in the future.
Abhishek, I would like to bring you into the conversation at this point. We spoke about the healing side of Saturn. You said you mentioned something about Shiva being Saturn's Ishtadev.
So there's what I know of the story of Saturn is Shani, Saturn, was a great devotee of Shiva. And one day he was so immersed in the puja, in the dhyana of Shiva, that when his wife, Dhamani, entered, he did not notice her. And then his wife cursed him to have a gaze which will not incite opulence, which will not be a gaze of admiration, but a gaze which can crush or move a life into great trial and tribulation. And I feel my relationship, at least what I learned from that story, that if you want to avert the gaze of Shani, then you must respect the women around you.
That's a very good
Especially
message.
your wife.
Especially your wife, and not give them attention, but respect them mindfully, which is a very different kind of
I think
approach to build a relationship.
A little bit of attention would also go a long way. I would
I support
definitely
that.
recommend that as
But
well.
I'll take it one step ahead, that it's not just women, it's the feminine energy. And that feminine energy emanates from the earth. And I feel that to find a relationship with our own planet it's the first stepping stone to be finding a relationship with all the planets around us. And I think this whole idea of finding a relationship with a planet far, far away and that having a strong influence over us, I think the first thing you will run to is your mother, which is the earth. And I think this is another way of looking at the whole story. So that would be a little bit of my anecdote on the thing.
On Saturn, yes. Now, the other planets, so Saturn is one of 9 planets that rules our horoscopes and rules our astrological lives, so to say. So as per Jyotish, each horoscope or each planet, has its own role, its defined role. So what is the special designated role for Saturn? And also exploring a little bit of the others, so we get a holistic view on the other planets as well and where Saturn sits there.
The 9 so-called planets of Jyotish are actually 5 planets, the 5 visible planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The 2 luminaries, the sun and the moon, and the 2 points in the sky where eclipses take place, the so-called north node or Rahu and the south node or Ketu. But let me emphasize again that these are archetypes. By taking those 9 together, we can represent the entirety of human experience, and that's why that they're employed, because they can represent the entirety of human experience. The sun, for example, represents the soul of the individual. It also represents the government. It also represents the king. It represents the metal gold. It has a number of different representations that, as archetypes will do, that display themselves in different times, in different contexts in our lives. The moon is juicy, dark, and in certain ways complementary to the sun, in certain ways opposite the sun. Mars is the young, extremely aggressive, assertive prince. Mars is all about act first and think about it later on. So Mars allows you to move forward, but if you always do nothing but move forward, you are, as was said about one general of the past, all lion and no fox. Mercury is all about communication. It's about communication of all sorts of things. It's about commerce, which is communication of monetary energy. It's about literary. It's about the employment of language in all ways. It's about making jokes and wordplay, puns. Jupiter is one of the two benefic planets. Unfortunately, not all planets are particularly benefic. Jupiter is one of them, and Jupiter is the biggest of the planets other than the Sun. So Jupiter represents expansion, and Jupiter in Sanskrit is usually the word used is guru. So Jupiter represents mentors, people who give you good advice. Jupiter represents all things that that provide learning and understanding and making people understand. Venus is also one of the two gurus. Jupiter is said to be the Deva Guru, the guru of the Devatas, and Venus, the guru of the Asuras. And one way we can look at the difference between the Devatas and the Asuras is that the Devatas are more altruistic, more focused on other people's thoughts, and the Asuras are more self-focused thoughts. So the planet Venus is all about the arts. It's all about everything that has to do with doing things well. It's all including especially food. It's about poetry. Venus was the first poet, the Kavi Raja. And it's about desire in general. Saturn is about everything that pretty much negates everything else. Rahu is a head with no body. And we're living in a world that is very much Rahu world right now, because I have a screen like most other people do. But I am alert to the amount of attention that I allow that screen to drag out of me, because many people spend all their time in front of the screen. The body becomes inert. The mind becomes very active, and that's what Rahu is about, a head with no body. So there's all kinds of desire. Rahu tried, supposedly, to eat the sun and the moon because of a complicated myth back at the time of the Samudra Manthan. But Vishnu, with his Sudarshana chakra, Sudarshana means good sight, chopped his head off. So anything that Rahu eats, he can't digest. So in a Rahu period, you're never going to be satisfied with anything, no matter if your life is totally perfect, because it creates dissatisfaction. Ketu, you can't even think about. It's the bottom half of the cosmic snake. It's all about the unconscious. And that's why, for example, it rules things like, on the one hand, accidents, and on the other hand, moksha, transcending all the limitations of embodied reality. It has been said that there are 3 planets that can give you spiritual development. One is Jupiter. Jupiter makes you go and meet gurus, and you read philosophical books, and you think philosophically, and you realize that no, it is appropriate to be spiritual. And Saturn, let's say that you have decided you want to be a thief, you will be caught, you'll be thrown in jail, you'll have plenty of time to meditate. And you will realize that, frankly, I don't want to be in jail, but being obliged to be born on the earth is like being in jail. Therefore, I'm going to sit here and try to transcend that. And Ketu, the way he works is you go to sleep at night thinking, I'm going to rob the bank tomorrow morning. I'm making all my plans. And tomorrow morning you wake up and you think, instead of robbing the bank, I'm going to go live in a cave, be a troglodyte, and be aware of the supreme reality. Those are the 9 planets.
Thank you. So, Abhishek, as a storyteller, especially working in the realm of gods and goddesses, where do you see all of this fitting in? Or rather, how do you take this further in your stories?
I think one very basic way to look at any story is to ask interesting questions. So Saturn is meditating on Shiva, or one way to find a relationship with Saturn is to understand what the Saturn is thinking about. What is Saturn thinking about? Saturn is thinking about Shiva. But what is Shiva? So Shiva is a yogi, but what is a yogi? Yogi comes from yuj, which means to align. Someone who's trying to align something. What are you trying to align? So in your body, you have 12 systems: cardiovascular, endocrine system, your nervous system, your skeletal system. You have 12 layers to your body, 12 sheets to your body. And you're trying to find an alignment between all those 12 layers and then find a certain tuning to this instrument of the body and mind and the spirit, and then use it to align with the cosmos and further aspects. So that's basically the great alignment the Shani or Saturn is meditating upon. But what else is Shiva? Shiva is also married to Uma, to Shakti, to Parvati. So there is a meditation about Earth itself. But what is the Earth? Earth is also an ecosystem. It has the Marutsit, it has the Adityas, the light from the sun, it has the Vasus, the ocean currents. Everything works in this great harmony in nature. So basically what Saturn is hinting at is to figure out a meditation about this great harmony and synchronicity around you. Losing your identities, losing your older identities, forging newer identities, perhaps even losing that. So as a storyteller, I feel that for me, it's to really go into the center of the story and really ask all these questions. At the same time, one can ask a question that why do you use oil to anoint Shani? Why do you give and offer the oil to Shani? That was a question for me. Because mustard seed, first of all, has come across in various stories. Even Jesus is holding a mustard seed and saying that the whole kingdom is inside this mustard seed to a king. It's also a story in the Upanishad where sage Aruni is saying the whole tree comes from this seed and then goes back into nothingness, and from that nothingness comes the entire tree. So mustard seed is also because it's very good for infections in a way. It's basically a healing seed. At the same time, because he's meditating on Shiva, who's a yogi, you're talking about the endocrine system, you're talking about the 7 glands and the oils they secrete. You're also talking about the spine, which is about the cerebrospinal fluid. So these are the oils your body is producing from inside. So when you eat food, which is solid food, it ascends into your cerebral space here and becomes etheric gold. So if you eat spinach, that's iron, and you are eating iron, and that's turning into etheric gold in your cranium here. So your endocrine system is also the alchemist's stone. So it's kind of metaphorized in various ways in different cultures. So Shani is basically a meditation on all these things, at least when I look at it from a storyteller's perspective.
Right. So that's a little bit of Ayurveda also there.
Yes.
And I think, the interesting thing is that Jyotish, Ayurveda, the mythological stories, all of them are so connected with each other that one does not really know where one stops and the other begins. On this, our discussion is on Shani, and we're celebrating the greatness of Saturn. And in your book, Robert, there is the Shani Mahatmya, which talks about the greatness of Saturn. So the story goes that King Vikramaditya called for scholars to come in and discuss which is the greatest planet. And there was a Vidwan, or there was a scholar representing each planet, and they had a discussion. So if we could talk a little bit about that.
Yes. And if I might, just before I get into that, I think that at the center of understanding anything about human beings is to understand that everyone has a personal story. Everyone has a narrative, whether they're aware of it or not. Everyone has a story that we're telling ourselves about who we are, about how we interact with the world, about how things are working well for us or not, and why they're working well for us or not. And it has been the experience of those who have studied divination here in India that it is useful to use these 9 grahas as to find out the ways that they interact with you, to make them part of an understanding of them part of your personal story, because it is possible to perform something we'll come to in a minute called upaya, to have a remedy so that, in fact, even if it's not a rational way of doing things, you may be able to align yourself better with reality by aligning yourself better with one or more of these archetypes. And the Shani Mahatmya, which I was fortunate to have been introduced to, I personally believe it was Shani Dev who introduced himself to me via that story. I originally saw it in its Gujarati version, and back at that time it was easily available in Gujarati and in Marathi, almost identical, neither of which are easily available anymore. So it was at a moment when I could have access to it that I did, and my Gujarati is even worse than my Marathi, which is not at all good. So I had the assistance of this nice lady right over there to translate it from Gujarati into English, and I compared it with the Marathi. Thank God it is a small book. And it's the story of Raja Vikramaditya, who, as you may know, is a very famous character here in India, who probably did exist, though probably everything that they say he did, he may or may not have done. But it doesn't really matter because people now believe that he did those things. So now he has become his own sort of myth. He's become his own sort of archetype. He may have started off as an individual, but he became an archetype. And an important reason for that is because he was trying to do the right thing. And as we've seen so often in, for example, the Itihasa, in the Mahabharata, what happens to poor old Bhishma? He tries to do the right thing, and every time he tries to do the right thing, he does the wrong thing. And he keeps trying to do the right thing, and he keeps doing the wrong thing because of his fate. And so it was King Vikramaditya's fate that after he had listened to all the pundits, and Shani Maharaj's pundit said, Shani is terrible, fall down at his feet, maybe he will give you some grace. And Vikramaditya said, oh my goodness, OMG, what a terrible planet this is. I don't know how to say anything other than he is a terrible planet. Unfortunately, Saturn was passing by and heard him and came down and said, Kyun?
Let me show you.
Or whatever language they were speaking back then. And so King Vikramaditya fell down at his feet and, of course, realized it was too late. And Saturn says, now I'm going to show you what I can do. You treated me with inappropriate, insufficient respect. So now you will have plenty of time to remember what has happened. So eventually, what happened? He had his arms and legs chopped off, and he had to spend 7.5 years on top of a pole herding an ox around in a circle, grinding oil out of sesame seeds, which is why sesame seeds are sacred to Saturn. And yes, this probably does have a lot to do with the fact that the Earth is on an axis and it's going around this way. And there are a lot of different levels to any kind of myth, especially in this country. And so after 7.5 years, the king started to think, whoa, it's been 7.5 years. It would be nice if Saturn would give me some kripa at this point. Please give me some grace. And Saturn becomes gracious. He gets his arms and legs back. He gets a beautiful wife. He gets his kingdom back. Everything is great. And he says, the first thing he says is, now I'm going to establish a big old Shani temple here in the city of Ujjain. And everybody who has any sense is going to go to it and bow down repeatedly and beg for mercy. And lo and verily, everybody did.
We spoke about upayas. You mentioned the power of upayas and how they work. Like, could you tell us more about that, especially in context of Shani?
As my Jyotish guru, who was a very eccentric Punjabi gentleman who lived in Toronto for 40 years, used to say, the sad reality is you will never know whether an upaya has worked or not. An upaya is a remedy.
I see a lot of nodding heads in the audience.
If you do the remedy and you get a result, You don't know. Maybe I would have got the result without the remedy. You will never know. So the fact of doing the upaya is a statement to the universe that you would like very much a little bit of assistance to start moving in a different direction. And it may be the universe is assisting you, and it may be that it is your determination to be willing to do things in a different way that is providing you the assistance. The main lesson that Saturn wants to give you is you have to take responsibility for yourself. You have to be disciplined. You have to understand that there are limits in life, and you have to live within your limits. Or as my mentor, Vimalanandaji, used to like to say, it is always better to live with reality, because if you don't, you can be sure that one day or another, reality will come to live with you.
And what about gemstones for upaya? You know, that's very popular in the Indian context, where a lot of jewelers get very happy when pundits prescribe gemstones. What is your take on gemstones for upayas?
Mantriji, my Jyotish guru, was categorical about the fact that a gemstone does not change the natural indications of the graha. The gemstone will magnify its effects. It will not make things better. So if you go to some astrologer who says, oh my God, your Saturn is in terrible shape, you must wear this giant blue sapphire that is going to cost you a lakh or two. Run away. Do not wait to pick up your pen and your pencil. Leave immediately, because a blue sapphire is something that is not a joke. And only very certain people should wear that. So you should only wear a gemstone. Now, if the gemstone is less than 2 carats, it doesn't make that much difference. That's fine. But if it's 2 carats or more, then it will do something, but it will only do good things if the planet is already going to do good things in your horoscope. Otherwise, if you want to do an upaya, you need to do something other than wearing gemstones. One way is to wear, for example, I'm wearing a steel horseshoe nail that was blessed by Vimalananda's guru. That's why I'm wearing it. But steel, iron is the metal for Saturn. So it is good to wear something iron or steel if you're having a problem with Saturn. Steel and iron have an astringent quality to them, and that astringent rasa is transmitted into your body through your skin. This ring I'm wearing here is made out of a shank, a conch shell. You can buy them easily. I buy mine in Benares, but you can buy them in Calcutta, or I think they're made in Orissa. And that's for the moon, because all seashells relate to the moon. And this is copper, which is good for Mars, and it has an image of a snake on it, which is good for Rahu and Ketu. These sorts of things will have a positive effect because they are reflecting the refined qualities of the grahas. Another really good way to do an upaya, which is also good for your physical body, is to fast once a week on the day of the graha that is problematical for you. So Sunday for the sun, Monday for the moon, Tuesday for Mars, Wednesday for Mercury, Thursday for Jupiter, Friday for Venus, Saturday for Saturn and Rahu. Tuesday is for Ketu. And if you don't have any clue, always choose Saturn. Because as Mantri said, the other 8 grahas are important, no doubt, but Saturn is really, really important. And anything that you do in a positive way to respect that graha is going to have a positive effect for you. So let's just say that you are fasting on Saturday, and maybe you're reciting a mantra for Saturn. You will note that the word Shani and the word Shiva, and for that matter the word Shankara, all begin with Sha. And that Sha also is connected to the bija mantra Sham, from which we get the word Shanti. So worshipping Saturn and Shiva is for the purpose of creating Shanti. Today we have plenty of Ashanti. There is no peace in the world. Therefore, worshipping Shiva and or Saturn is going to promote Shanti in a positive way. In addition to this, in the case of Shani in particular, Shani represents everybody who is outside of normal society. So if you serve homeless people, poor people, people in sanatoria and hospitals and jails and monasteries, all of these are ways to respect the archetypal energy of Saturn. You can feed crows on Saturday. Seagulls for Rahu, crows for Saturn. There are many, many things that you can do, but the most you can recite the Hanuman Chalisa, which even though it is not in Sanskrit, other mantras don't have to be in Sanskrit. The fact is that so many millions of people recite the Chalisa that it has come to have a tremendous power in and of itself, and it is dedicated to Hanuman, who is the 11th of the Rudras. That means he is Shiva, and also he is the embodiment of wind, because he is son of Marut, and therefore wind means prana, and it is prana that is keeping us alive, and it is a harmonious alignment with prana that is making us able to do whatever it is that we do in the world. Therefore, you can't go wrong by worshiping Hanuman. Bajrangabali ki jai ho.
You know, when you spoke about fasting, like fasting once a week for any grahe, at that time when you were talking about if you do not have a clue, I was like, you're going to tell us to fast all 7 days. But I guess that.
Well, you can do intermittent
I know that's
fasting
That's,
for all
we've
7
discovered
days.
that's the best thing for health.
Intermittent fasting is great.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to do it here, but when I'm in one stable location, I often do it. Only eat during 8 hours of the day. That means start at 10 and quit at 6, start at 8 and quit at 4, whatever it is. You will see a difference. Try it out.
That's also the Ayurveda expert talking here.
Om.
So, Abhishek, because your art really...
Could I just say one thing?
Yes.
For example, drawing pictures of the grahas, of the devatas, this is also a kind of upaya. So what Abhishek himself is doing, not only can we see these, that's a nice upaya, to have darshan of the devata, but also to create it is an upaya as well.
No, I agree with that, and I think that resonates a lot with me. Of maybe we can do a upaya of respecting women in this country.
Yes, that is...
Because Shani became
much
Shani.
needed. That is much needed.
Shani became Shani because he did not really notice his wife.
But
so
I think that,
if you notice
that
the
has a
feminine
different
energy in some
connotation
way,
also.
surely,
It's,
but I think you can slightly improvise it here and there. As he's saying, it's kind of improvisational. So one of the fun theories I learned about Saturn, are there any Lord of the Rings fans in the audience? Right, so we have a few. So if you see the timeline of humanity, it's completely full of war and territorialism and just, taking the territory from each other and bath and all that kind of stuff. So they say that Saturn makes this very strong sound as a planet. And the sound is so eerie that even though we know that the rings of Saturn are debris and ice, it's actually manifestations of that sound. And that sound echoes and ripples across the universe, gets amplified by the moon, and influences the design of the human mind to a degree when the human impulse is to follow violence. And hence, every theology, every religion, or every prophetic idea is talking about a different design of the human mind, which is more compassionate and not driven towards violence. So in the great book, The Lord of the Rings, that's why it's called Lord of the Rings, because it's based on the Saturnian Principle. This is the Saturnian Principle that the influence of Saturn moves you towards the dark side. So anyone in the book who is close to the ring, one ring to rule them all, feels the presence of the dark side, and doesn't matter how good they are, even Gandalf or even the best of the kings, they feel tempted to go into the dark side and give into the dark side. And so it takes Bilbo, it takes Frodo, who's not a warrior, who's not the most accomplished person, but is completely, absolutely all-encompassing good, to take that ring and then dissolve it in that, and basically create a death of the ring eventually. And he represents the little good. He represents that little good can be so powerful that it can break away from the influence of a big planet like that. So I thought that's an interesting theory which I kind of one of those theories around the book per se. And the most important thing for me would be this, I would just resonate with what you said about meditation on Shiva, or which for me means the idea of earth, which means that there is, if you can eat spinach, as I said before, you will have iron in your body, and Shani likes iron, right? So it's eating right, it's kind of thinking the right kind of things on that day, is observing silence, you know. It's not glancing through the world that day, it's truly spending time with seeing, truly giving attention to something, right?
Including your wife.
We can keep repeating it. That's a good thing to say, though. Yes. So that would be my perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
So talking about the planets and Shani, you know, we must salute him. What is it that one cannot avoid? You know, there's certain things that are avoidable. There's certain things that are not avoidable, as per Jyotish. And what is a safeguard or a suraksha kavach that we can create for ourselves?
I would like to first reinforce the concept that because Saturn is a planet that is said to be mute, that observing silence, especially on Saturday, really is a very good upaya for Saturn. The second thing that I would like to comment on is that it is true that Saturn encourages you to move towards the dark side of things because he is dark. Sometimes he's described as the sun, S-U-N, of the night. But he's always described as the sun, S-O-N, of the sun, S-U-N. But he's the son of the sun and chaya. Chaya means the shadow. Because what happened was the sun had a wife, but the sun was very bright. And the sun was so bright, he had no opportunity to pay attention to his wife because he could never exactly locate her anywhere because he was too bright. So, yes, like father, like son, exactly, that's correct. So what happened after a while, he was so bright that the wife said, I can't take this anymore, I'm going to go down to earth and I'm going to do penance so I can withstand his brilliance. He didn't even notice that his wife was gone because she took her shadow and brought it to life, and he meanwhile caused her to have 3 more children without realizing that it was the shadow instead of the wife. And Saturn was one of those children. And eventually they got back together, etc. But meanwhile, the sun himself had brought shadow to life. So the sun had brought to life, the soul, the Atma itself, had brought to life this blind spot. That's what Saturn is. Saturn is your blind spot. It's the thing that you were most likely to be unable to avoid because it's difficult for you to see. There's always a blind spot. There's always something that you can't see in your life, and that's the thing that Saturn is going to try to make you be able to perceive. So yes, he encourages you to move towards the dark side, but that's because the dark side is the shadow. He's not doing that because he is an evil planet. He's doing that because he wants you to look at your own shadow and see where you are not evolved, and see where there is darkness inside you, and make that explicit instead of implicit so you can evolve. So it's not something that he enjoys doing. Naturally, who would enjoy doing a job that makes everybody either fear you, hate you, or run away from you? But it's his job. So he has to do his job. He's a professional. He appreciates the fact that he has a job and he wants to do it well, which means he tries very hard to cause people to experience those things, whatever it may be for you. Everyone has to find out for themselves what upaya works best, and everyone has to look inside themselves and see what is it in themselves that they are least able to see. What is it that they are most reacting with? I mean, what is the thing that makes them most reactive so that they can't act meaningfully and purposefully, but they are simply reacting towards. So, I mean, obviously, the big thing that none of us can avoid is dying. And Saturn is not going to stop you from dying, but Saturn is going to make you come to grips with death. And that's something all of us have to come to grips with. And old age, if you're lucky enough to become less young, you're also lucky enough to understand what it is like to not have that same vigor and ability to recuperate that you have when you're young. So in addition to the advantages of becoming older, you have the disadvantages of falling apart. As they say in Ayurveda, the word sharira, you probably are familiar with that. Yeah. But sharira means that which deteriorates.
And Saturn, I think, rules the bones as well.
Definitely.
You know, the structure.
The bones and the nerves also.
The bones and the nerves, yes. And yes.
Everything that has the prana flowing through it in large amounts.
Right. And mustard is good for your heart, blood circulation, so it kind of makes sense, all of it.
Definitely.
And every once in a while we hear about someone having like a really strong positive Shani in their horoscope. And so what is that about? Especially, I've seen that, I've heard of that with a lot with like politicians and actors, like people in the limelight. And they flash these big blue sapphire rings, which are getting them all this success, apparently.
Yes, of course, it's always good to follow people like that to find out how they end up. Because atyuche patanam, number one, and what Saturn can do for you is provide you with adibautic, that means mundane or worldly benefits. He's very good at that. And he is about to move into Capricorn. Capricorn is a Rashi that is, Makara is a Rashi that relates to the earth element. So Saturn is partly earth and partly air. That's what makes him astringent, because the astringent taste in Ayurveda is partly earth and partly air. That is what makes it dry also. But the earth is something that, let's remember that Lakshmi is Lambija, that represents the earth element, that represents the material reality. So Saturn can be good for giving you material benefit. Of course, the sad reality is if you have too much money, that means more than you can digest, your mind will become overwhelmed with tamas. And Saturn rules tamas. So is it a curse or is it a blessing? That's always our question. You don't want having too much money is a big curse. Is it worse than having not enough? That's a good question. But definitely you want just the right amount so you can do what you need to do. You can assist other people that you are obliged to assist, who are part of your karmic circle of people that you need to pay attention to, but you don't need any more than that. Mm-hmm. So Saturn is very good, and yes, for politicians, it can assist you to work with the masses, like Rahu, Saturn relates to the masses. It assists you to do practical things like build structures. Saturn relates to rocks and bricks and things like that. It assists you to provide stable foundations if you use it in a strong way. But it does also require you to make sure that the tamas is all outside and not on the inside. An example of this is Richard Nixon, who became president of the United States during a period of Shani, and so far has been the only president who has had to resign. So yes, Shani gave him this benefit, but then he said, by the way, you've had enough now. Now there will be some unhappiness provided also.
So Abhishek, I was kind of overlooking or peeping into the book. You were doing something. You were doodling.
Yes, I made use of the time I had, and I made a sketch for Robert here of Shani.
Oh, okay. So that's
maybe you can show it. It's a little drawn meditation done in Shanti.
Robert.
And
I don't know if this can come on screen.
And he's meditating on the feminine divine.
And in this picture, he does seem to be in a very healing mode.
Yes.
That's a softer side.
Yes.
The crow is there.
Crow is there. I love crows.
Right.
And Shani is definitely, for me, a meditation on your own inner being, finding a certain alignment with your own life, with your own inner, being, meaning that even your physical life per se, and finding a certain relationship with earth. I feel that when he's meditating on Shiva, that really what means to me by the end of it. Like when I think of Shiva, I think of the mountains,
Yes.
And mountains have this beautiful energy about them. They have a certain electromagnetic impulse. And I think if we can connect to earth in the name of Shani, I think the mother will tell us all the upayas we need to know to kind of counter or complement or harmonize with a distant planet like Saturn.
Definitely. Absolutely.
So before we open our session to questions from the audience, Robert, any closing remarks or anything that I may have left out that you wish to talk about?
Well, just to amplify what Abhishek was just saying, which is Saturn is very hard. And it's very commonly the case that when you're influenced by this particular graha, Saturn, and I think it's good to note that the word graha means the thing that grabs hold of you. It grasps, it grips, it gropes. There's a lot of GR going on. So it grabs hold of you and it tries to make you hard also. When what you should learn is how to, in the midst of hardness, in the midst of adversity, how to become soft, how to continue being compassionate even when what's happening to you externally is something very hard. A Tibetan monk was interviewed some years ago who had stayed in Tibet after the Chinese came in and was tortured for many years. And he came to the Dalai Lama after he had escaped from Tibet, and he said to His Holiness, I had great fear at one point. And His Holiness said, why did you have great fear? And the monk said, there was a point where I felt I was losing my compassion. There was a point where I felt I was about to start hating the Chinese. But that moment passed. So this is what Saturn gives us the opportunity to do. Even when things are really terrible in our lives, to acknowledge that we don't have to internalize that. We don't have to take that in. We can maintain our own internal softness, our own connection to compassion, our own connection to the reality of the positive aspects of life, and we can move ahead. And that's what Saturn wants to teach us. It's just that he is an extraordinarily strict disciplinarian, and therefore it is good to be very reverent in his direction.
Also, I just want to add that the animals associated with Saturn, like the crow, the elephant, donkey, and the dog, and you must treat all these animals with great love. If you want to have Saturn look at you with an eye of love and not with the eye of trials. So I think...
and the vulture.
Yeah. And the vulture,
which
yes.
He sits on...
unfortunately, doesn't exist anymore in this country. So we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean?
That's a resounding observation right there. And I would open the session to Q&A. I see many hands coming up. Over there, would we have a mic there? In the back? Oh yeah, sure, you can go ahead, sir.
Yes, my question is that there are many systems of astrology. Just like in past, there were Parashar Hora and Deepika, Mansagri, etc. They predict the system of Sarasati Daya. But there is another system of KP, Krishna Murti Paddhati, that does not allows you to take on Sarasati and Daya, and does not anything on transit system of Sarasati Daya. What do you say about that? But the prediction based on the Krishna Murti Paddhati are just an accurate like mathematics.
That's a very technical question. I think it's clearly for you, Robert.
It's a technical question that I will try to answer quickly because it will not mean anything to anybody else. All versions of any kind of system of divination, any system of astrology even, whether it is Parashari, or whether it is Nilakanta Tajika, or whether it is Nadi Jyotish, whatever it may be, they're all maps of reality. They're not reality. They're ways of mapping reality. And KP, Krishnamurti Paddhati, is a very good way of doing that. Of course, Krishnamurti himself had an image of Uchishta Ganesha that was given to him by the Paramacharya of Kanchi Peeth. And it is said that having worshipped that and obtained Siddhi of it, that's the reason why his predictions work, and the predictions of a large percentage of those who attempt to perform KP are not as good.
Yes. Second row over here on my board.
I just want to ask Rudraksha as a upaya.
IMO, Rudraksha is a very good upaya, as long as it's genuine. And it's a good upaya because it is supposed to be the Rudra Aksha, the eye of Shiva. So yes, wearing the Rudraksha, sometimes taking a single Rudraksha, soaking it in water overnight, drinking the water, sometimes worshipping the Rudraksha, entering into a relationship with the Rudraksha.
There was a hand that went up over there. Blue, a lady in blue.
That's a good, yes. How about the Ekamukhi?
Ekmukhi would be the most.
Ekmukhi would be the best.
Would be the best.
But I would say worry less about the mukhis and worry more about how you were relating to it. So yes, if you can get Ashtamukhi, should be for Shani, or Saptamukhi, one of those two.
Yes. Yes.
Hi. So I've been meaning to ask this question to Robert sir for a very long time. You also spoke about this topic in your other panel that you had, which was on intermittent fasting. So I just wanted to make one point, which is that I feel Indians, we've had a certain kind of diet and we do follow like certain eating patterns, and there's some foods that we're used to eating for many years. But intermittent fasting is something that has recently started to come up now. So how do you propose that we can kind of include it in our lives?
Well, and I acknowledge that this is something that may seem difficult for people, but let's remember that it has only been in the past 50 or 60 years that people have been able to eat 24 hours a day. There was not that much food available. Everybody didn't have a refrigerator. The whole point was you ate fresh food because you had to eat fresh food, and you did not have food sitting around all the time. You ate when the food was prepared, and that's the way that is normal for human beings to do. So what we're doing now is completely abnormal, sadly.
There are a few questions here in the second and third row.
But we have to hurry because time is marching on.
Running out, yeah.
Yeah, so one point, you have Shani Dasha, and there's something called Shani ki Mahadasha.
Yes.
Is there a difference between that? That's number one. And the second point, as you correctly pointed out, that Shani is a very slow planet. Is it a teacher also? Or is that a myth?
Saturn is definitely a teacher, but he's the kind of teacher like the guard in the jail is a teacher.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you.
There's a question over there. Yes, ma'am. So the Shani ki Mahadasha. We'll probably take the 2-3 questions together. And then
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to ask you that we are talking of the fear and the darkness and all that stuff about Shani. But your book is about the greatness of Shani. Right. I want to know that one positive thing or more than one positive things you would say about Shani.
Among the many positive things that I could say about Shani is that he is completely and utterly relentless. And this is something that is worth learning from him. That if you decide that you want to move ahead in a certain direction, you should do that no matter how long it takes. You put one foot in front of the other, Agni Pata, you just keep going straight ahead. You just keep moving ahead. Whatever happens, it doesn't matter. That is my goal. Manzil to wahi hai, I'm going, mara arth yehi hai, I'm moving in that direction. I will not allow anything to stop me. And that is what Saturn can bless you to do, to give you that internal iron and steel that will cause you to, and sometimes it's not a pleasant thing to do. So Shani Mahadasha, 19 years. If you have that if you have your Sadhisati during that makes things even more intense. So remain calm. Yes, and
All the best.
and I've been two, and I'm through two, and I'm waiting for the third to start. So
And ma'am,
I have a few good years left, and then
and to learn about the greatness of Saturn, I would urge you to pick this book up. It's a great one. Oh, you have it. Brilliant.
and reading. I mean,
And reading
I
the-
shouldn't. It's my book, but really reading it, and I found from reading the Gujarati and Marathi versions, reading it is a really good upaya.
Okay, so we have time for two more questions. There's been this hand up here for very long. We'll get here and then we'll come back to this side. Yeah.
So I had one question.
Yeah, keep the mic nearby.
Why is black as a color always associated to Saturn or Shani? And another question is that
One
is it-
question, please.
Okay.
So that
Please
question
restrict
is
it to a question.
remember that Saturn is the son of the sun and shadow. So shadow is compared to the sun. Shadow is black. So that's representing everything that is
No, no,
not
no. They
expansive
have a
and
mic.
bright. Everything that is dark. Everything that sucks the light away. And so you have to find the light on the inside instead of relying on light from the outside.
Yeah. Over here, please, sir.
That was a wonderful session, and thank you so much, all three of you. My question is from a more layman's perspective. In life, if we're going through like a really tough or challenging phase, where do we draw the line and say, this is teaching me something, I need to go through this? Or we say, I gotta fix this. I need to run to someone with my patrika or my horoscope, know which stone to wear, which upayas to do, which cow to feed. So like, how do we sort of draw the line, or is there a balance that we can keep both of them? So if Dr. Svoboda could,
Well, it would be nice if it was very easy to tell the to know always what was the right thing to do. But this is why often, if you can identify in yourself what is the right path, you should not try to think it out rationally. If you can, that's great. You should not try to think it out emotionally. Humans, since the beginning of being human, have chiefly thought intuitively. They've thought from down here. They have thought from the gut. This is the place where the prana, you were getting prana when you were in the womb. This is the place where your prana is centered. And aligning yourself with the prana means aligning yourself with your dharma. The better you can align yourself with your prana will mean that you're moving along ahead with your dharma. But if Shani is influencing you too much, you may not be able to see that. And sometimes that means that then you go to the astrologer or to your guru or to your parents or to whoever is giving you good advice, and you pray that your karmas are not so bad that they will give you bad advice. Okay. But if that is, the worst thing that can happen is, our mushkil ho jayega.
I just want to add a very quick thing that for a lot of people who don't know much Jyotish and are new age and they are wanting to explore this Saturn thing, Saturn is meditating on Shiva. Shiva is married to Uma, which is earth. Shiva is a yogi. And Shiva's family is an ecosystem. It's the complete harmonious synchronicity which you find in earth. So find a thing which you want to contribute in this planet, learn about the planet. And he loves Hanuman, and Hanuman is prana. So take long breaths when things get tougher and try to connect
Which
with
we
the
do
earth.
automatically anyways.
Which is
Yes.
a really good, this is an extremely good point that most people, especially nowadays, but most people don't breathe properly. Just breathing from your gut, because when you're fearful, you'll start breathing thoracically. Whenever you feel fearful, calm your amygdala down by naming to yourself what that fear is, and then start breathing abdominally, and automatically you will start to relax, and you'll start to realize that things are not as bad, because as my mother and my sister is right here, she can testify that our mother told us this all the time. Always, you can find something to be thankful for, because things can always be worse. So,
because when you're in nature, your body is responding yogically. Let's say that's why all the temples and all the monasteries are up on the mountain. Because when you walk a mountain up, you're basically doing this. Inhaling, retention of the breath, and exhaling. That's pranayama. When you take a dubki, you inhale, you hold inside the water, and you exhale. That's a pranayama. So if you spend time in nature, your body is automatically responding yogically.
Thank you so much, Robert G.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Anubhav
much,
ji.
Abhishek
Thank you,
ji.
Abhishek ji.
Thank you so much for this. And I'm going to take a deep breath before we set out.
Thank you very much indeed to Robert Svoboda, Abhishek Singh, and Anubhav Nath. They will be in the book signing tent. The book signing tent for this venue is at the back of Mughal tent. So if you walk out of the gate here and simply walk in a straight line, eventually you'll reach it. For those of you who are staying with us, our next session starts at 3:45, session 70, Ways of Seeing, the Power and Politics of Representation. So we will return shortly.
Thank you.